Am I in the center? Okay. So hi, this is 5:05 in the evening, and today, well, as the title shows, I want to talk about how I handle my students. Especially this would be about setting or creating boundaries with my students. So where do I start? Okay, my intention behind this video actually originates from the experiences or some kind of events that happened very recently. I mean, the reason why I'm making this video is because of the events that happened recently to me. So yeah, I was like, if I make contents out of the events that I have experienced for my videos of my channel, then it could be a really great opportunity for me to express my personal feelings and thoughts on some topics, and it would be also a really great tip for a lot of instructors out there, just like me. Okay, let me tell you what has happened. Okay, maybe like 3 days ago, I was basically teaching my kids as usual. And before talking about what has happened, I just want to say, I'm kind of a person or a teacher who is basically smiling all the time, who is trying to smile towards my students, basically. I'm that kind of a person. I really don't want to hurt their feelings. I always take care about their feelings. I always try to avoid some kind of like emotional encounters with my students because, I thought that was kind of like very unneeded, if that's the term. So basically, I've been always smiling and, very attentive to my students, which is basically, teachers' basic duty. But I have realized that, there are some students who basically take advantages of my kindness, of my attentiveness, if that's the word, my being considerate, basically. And after realizing that, I was like, okay, this is not right because those students actually started to act up and, basically exploit the whole situation where I am attentive to them, kind to them, while they are very rude, and sometimes they cross the boundaries, cross the line. I thought that was a very crucial moment where I have to change my method or approach to those kind of students, basically. So let me just tell you what has happened in my classroom. Of course, I'm not going to mention their names, personal details, or information. I just want to keep everything anonymous. So I'm just going to call them, I don't know, like student A, student B, student C. I'm not even going to use pronouns like he, she, they, because, I just don't want to personalize those names or their identities so that some people can realize who they are. So anyway, so let me talk about this student A first. This student A is a very special student in a good way. This student A can basically mesmerize people around. Okay, do I have to use pronouns? I mean, without pronouns, this would be very hard for me to continue to talk about these stories, basically. So I don't know. Okay. Let me just use pronouns he or she or him or her so that I can still keep all these things anonymous, right? He or she has some kind of like ability to mesmerize people around him or her because he or she has a very good outward appearances, and especially his or her personality is kind of like very sociable and very basically mesmerizing, so he or she, that student A, is really good at those kind of things. So I think I was definitely one of those people who are basically mesmerized by his or her charms. I hope this wouldn't sound that weird. When I say I was mesmerized by their personality, they have, I mean, he or she definitely has some kind of like capacity to make people like them. Yeah, let's put that way. Anyway, yeah, student A is definitely capable of that. So, 3 days ago, again, 3 days ago, just in front of my face, so this student A said, "Okay, you know what, teacher, if you are not gonna let me go get out of this classroom right now, I'm gonna kill you." Yeah, like, so I was very shocked by that comment. So I was like, I'm sorry, what did you say? I was like sincerely shocked. And that student A was kind of like murmuring. Yeah, he or she started murmuring, and he or she goes, "Oh, no, nothing. I didn't say anything." So I just let that moment slip away. I'm not sure if I'm using the right expression or not, but anyway, I just let that slip away, right? And after that student got out of my classroom, I have realized that, okay, I definitely have to set the limit. Let me talk to you about other students, student B or student C. So let me talk about this student B first. Student B, he or she is really friendly with me. I think I have created rapport with that student B very well recently. Somehow, I got the nickname, which is basically a Todd or a frog, by that student B, and I was totally okay with that. I don't know why I got the nickname. Maybe I resemble those kind of animals, but anyway, I was totally okay with that. But the problem was, whenever I speak, that student B goes, "Oh, Todd is basically opening his mouth. Oh my God, he is rambling again, blah, 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 blah," in in front of a lot of students, messing up the whole atmosphere of the classroom. I mean, if somebody says something funny, especially when a student says something funny, that can disrupt other students' mood to study or the whole ambiance of the classroom basically. But anyway, I am kind of a person or a teacher who basically embrace everything from students by smiling, by basically accepting every kind of behavior or comments from them, which is wrong, but I was that kind of a teacher. At first, I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. Just focus. Let's focus on studying. But the time went on, that student just started to get out of control, if that makes sense. The thing about this student B is that, even when I'm trying to be rigid and very strict with kids, this student B keeps asking me some kind of questions like, "Are you angry? I think you seem angry. Why are you angry? What happened to you? Like, come on, let's be happy." You know, that is the problem, right? So, anyway, yeah, before jumping to the conclusion, let me talk about one more student, the student C. Okay, the student C. Actually, This student C is not a single person. They are multiple students, but I'm just gonna categorize them into a one student. Okay, one group. Let's call them the student C. Anyway, the student C actually are out of control as usual. There are always students who do not listen to the teachers very well, even when the teachers are very angry with them and basically giving them some kind of like disciplining or some kind of rules or some kind of like advice or whatever, they don't listen. So they are definitely tough kids. These students see basically look down on teachers. That is basically why they really do not feel the need to listen to their own teachers. Actually, I was not the one who they were looking down on. There are some other teachers they were looking down on. I was not one of them, but I felt very sorry for the teachers who are going through those kind of situations recently. So I was like, okay, I definitely have to be the one who basically does something about the whole circumstance, right? To give you an example, let me talk about their responses to the teachers, especially when the teachers are trying to discipline them. Their responses are like, okay, whatever. Okay, I listen to you. Bye, bye, bye. They basically ignore or shut down the comments by coming from the teacher. I know it sounds horrible, and that is definitely not some kind of attitude the students should have, especially when they are being disciplined. And they basically destroy the whole atmosphere of the classroom by making a lot of noises and basically creating a lot of side chatter, and I don't know. Basically, by acting up, they end up making the whole classroom's atmosphere chaotic. You know, that is not good. Now, let's jump to the conclusion. How I deal with those kind of students: student A, student B, student C. So, after going through a lot of incidents with those kind of students, just like I said at the beginning of this video, I have decided to create some boundaries. I know this wouldn't be the best examples or the best maneuvers of creating boundaries, but I just decided to do it very passively. I have realized that would be the best way for me. At first, I thought about just yelling at them, but yelling at them is exactly not the best way to deal with the students, because that is not good for their emotional stance, emotional well-being, and my emotional well-being wouldn't be good, especially after yelling at the kids, and that is just against good education way. So, and plus my voice is really not for yelling at students basically, so that was not a good way for me. So instead, just like I mentioned, I have realized that just keeping kind of coldness would be a very effective way to handle the kids. So let me talk to you about the examples of that keeping my composure. So for student A basically, like I said, that student A has the ability to mesmerize people by using his or her personality to be sociable with others around him or her, right? And once student A creates some kind of like friendship or close relationships or rapport with others, that student A starts to cross the line. So to stop that kind of not right behavior from happening again, I started to be a little bit like cold and kind of like hostile. I'm not saying that I'm okay, let me put this way. I'm just I just decided to keep a little bit of distance between that student A and me. I mean, before trying this maneuver, I was like basically, adoring the kids the whole time, embracing and accepting every disruptive behavior from them. But this time, with this maneuver, I am like smiling, but with a very rigid and strict attitude, if that makes sense. So, okay, I'm like, if the student A did something well on his or her assignments or homework or whatever activities in the classroom, I definitely give that student A compliments and smiling. But it has to be very short. It has to be very short, and I definitely have to go back to the stance I was in, basically. So, expressionless face and very quiet and peaceful. And whenever the student A is trying to cross the line and try to make some noise or whatever, whenever he or she is trying to do something bad or disruptive to the classroom, I stop that student A by saying, stop, you're not supposed to be doing that. Just focus on the assignment or whatever you were doing right now. This is not the playground. You are supposed to be doing what I have told you to do. I mean, I don't even talk like this long, but I am basically giving that student A the hint that I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the mood. So just keep quiet, but not in a aggressive way. You have to do it very subtly, kind of like passively, but just like I said, I am not supposed to be aggressive towards my students. That is not a good way to deal with kids. So I have to keep my composure, very peaceful, very cold, but when they do well, I'm going to be kind of very kind and very attentive, but it has to be very short, right? And for student B, I basically apply exactly the same attitude or the maneuver that I have used on my student A. The student B has a very close relationship with me, but sometimes that student B crosses the line very frequently. So I just wanted to stop that, right? So I keep my composure, and whenever that student B is trying to cross the boundaries again, then I just say exactly the same thing. Like, you're not supposed to be doing that. You are not supposed to be making that kind of comments to the teacher. That is not the right way to talk to your teacher. Let's just keep some manner in this classroom and let's study. That is basically what we are supposed to do with expressionless face. I have realized that whenever you give some kind of like disciplining to your students, I am not supposed to be smiling. If I'm smiling, yeah, they will not consider that or take it seriously. I mean, it is such a matter of course that I have to keep a expressionless face or rigid or strict face while I'm disciplining my students. But I am basically the rookie in this field, education field. I mean, I think in one of my previous videos, I have mentioned that I've been an English teacher for a year, right? So yeah, I'm pretty new in this field. I mean, 1 year is a long period, but at the same time, it is such a short period and small experience as a teacher. So I didn't know that until, I don't know, 2 days ago. So, anyway, back to the point. staying calm and cold and peaceful and very quiet in front of the kids in my classroom is working very well. The students working very well for student C. Well, the student C who are basically rude and very disruptive towards their teachers are still very disruptive, and they are still acting up towards other teachers, but they don't do exactly the same thing to me, because I am basically creating the boundaries between me and them. They are not rude towards me. They are not disruptive in my classroom, because whenever they make side chatter, or bother other kids around them, I always stop them with a very rigid voice, so they listen to me. That is working, you know. Especially these days, in South Korea, there are some parents who think being strict and being kind of rigid towards the students or the kids is really not a good way to educate them. But I really don't think so. You know, you really have to be strict, and you really have to be very straight if you really want them to grow up as a proper adult who has a proper mentality and good manner for living in this society. It is a very unavoidable, necessary, uncomfortable education that we have to give our children. Of course, I always want to smile. I always want to, be warm towards them. I always want to give them freedom. I always want to make the whole atmosphere or ambience of my classroom very peaceful and very smiling, very bubbly and happy. Yeah, of course. But only with that kind of like so-called positive vibes or positive education or positive attitudes. That is not gonna work regarding giving proper education, proper teaching to them. Sometimes you definitely have to make a scary face or make some kind of like disciplining comments on them, and you definitely have to control them in some kind of like strict way. That is unavoidable. That is basically how to teach your students. But these days, especially these days, there are some kind of parents who are thinking some kind of like, rigid and strict atmosphere in the classroom must be avoided, which doesn't make sense to me, So I know this could be a very sensitive issue to some people, some parents, but I still think, this kind of disciplining is definitely a very essential part of the education for our students. In summary, I think I am doing pretty well in terms of conducting my students in my classroom. I definitely have to have, the right to lead my students in a right way, So I think I'm doing pretty well compared to myself in the past, And I definitely have to learn more throughout my career. Like I said, I've been a English teacher for only 4 years, so there are still a lot of things that I have to learn related to teaching my students. But anyway, yeah. These days, I have realized something very important, and I am definitely putting my words, my thoughts into a right action in a proper way. So yeah. So this is basically how I deal with some kind of like rude and disruptive students in my classroom, and I know I have to be more like specific with them, especially when I'm giving them some kind of like disciplining, but instead I'm being kind of like very passive, not passive aggressive, but passive only. I'm giving them hint. But yeah, like I said, I definitely have to be specific and verbal on what they can do and what they cannot do in my classroom. So I definitely have to have some kind of like improvements on them. So anyway, yeah, this video, okay, I've been filming for 41 minutes. Oh my god, this has been such long period of time. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the video right here. So anyway, I've talked about how I discipline my kids, how to deal with some kind of like problematic students in my classroom, and yeah, I definitely gave you guys some examples. So I hope this video was kind of like helpful to some instructors who are basically going through similar things as I am these days. Anyway, oh my god, I'm so tired. I mean, I've been talking consistently for 41, 42 minutes non-stop, so I'm feeling very tired and exhausted, mentally and physically both. So anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching today's video, and yeah, I hope you have a great day and see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.